but with those which may be the subject of doubt and consultation. Hence, it is conversant with the same things as prudence. Yet intelligence and prudence are not the same. For prudence, indeed, is of a commanding nature ; for the end of it is, what ought or what ought not to be done. But intelligence is alone of a judiciary nature. For intelligence is the same as right intelligence, since intelligent men are also rightly intelligent. Intelligence, however, is neither the possession nor the acquisition of prudence ; but as he who learns is said to understand what he learns, when he uses science. The like also takes place in the use of opinion in forming a judgment of those things with which prudence is conversant, and judging of them well, when another person is speaking. For what is well, is the same with what is beautifully done. And hence the name intelligence was derived, according to which men are said to be rightly intelligent, viz. From intelligence in learning. For we frequently use the verb to learn as equivalent to the verb to understand. CHAPTER 11. But what is called upright decision, according to which we say that men decide rightly, is the right judgment of the equitable man. As an indication of this, however, we say that the equitable man is especially inclined to pardon others, and that it is equitable to pardon certain things. But pardon is an upright judiciary decision of the equitable man. And the decision is upright which is made by a man observant of truth. All these habits, however, reasonably tend to the same thing. For we speak of upright decision, intelligence, prudence, and intellect with reference to the same persons, when we say that they are men of upright decision, are endued with intellect, are prudent and intelligent. For all these powers pertain to the extremes downward, and to particulars. And an intelligent man, and one who decides rightly, or a man disposed to pardon, will be one who possesses a judiciary power about things with which the prudent man is conversant. For things of an equitable nature are common to all good men, in their intercourse with others. Every thing, however, of a practicable nature pertains to particulars, and the downward extremes. For it is necessary that a prudent man should have a knowledge of these, and intelligence and equitable decision are conversant with things of a practicable nature, but these are extremes. And intellect pertains both to the upward and downward extremes. For intellect, and not the discursive energy of reason, is conversant with both first and last terms, i.e. with universal principles. The one indeed, i.e. the intellect, which is the principle of the demonstrative sciences, is conversant with immutable and first terms. But the intellect which is occupied in practical affairs, or which is the principle of prudence, is conversant with the extreme, and with that which is contingent, and the other proposition. For these are the principles of that for the sake of which a thing is done, or the final cause. For universal is from particulars. Of these, therefore, it is necessary to have a sensible perception, but this is the practical intellect. Hence, these habits appear to be natural, and no one indeed is wise by nature, but every one possesses naturally the power of deciding rightly, together with intelligence and intellect. But as an indication of this, we are of opinion that these habits are attendants on the ages of the life of men, and we say that this age, i.e. old age, possesses intellect and upright decision, as if nature were the cause of this. Hence, also, intellect is both the principle and the end. For from these demonstrations are framed, and with these they are conversant. Hence, in practical affairs, it is no less necessary to attend to the undemonstrated assertions and opinions of elderly or prudent men, than to demonstrations. For, in consequence of possessing an eye from experience, they perceive the principles of things of a practicable nature. And thus we have shown what wisdom and prudence are, and with what particulars each is conversant, and that each is the virtue of a different part of the soul. CHAPTER 12. Some one, however, may doubt concerning these, in what their utility consists. For wisdom, indeed, contemplates none of those things from which men will obtain felicity, since it is not conversant with any thing which is in generation, or which is becoming to be, or passing into existence. But prudence, indeed, does consider those things from which human felicity is derived. Yet on what account is it necessary that it should, since prudence is conversant with just and beautiful things, and which are good to man ? We do not, however, become at all more practically virtuous by knowing these things, since the virtues are habits, as neither are things said to be salubrious, or to conduce to a good habit of body, because they have an active power, but because they proceed from habit. For we are not at all more practical from possessing the medical or gymnastic art. But if a man is not to be considered as prudent for the sake of these things, but for the sake of becoming worthy, they will not be at all useful to those who are worthy. Again, neither will prudence be useful to those who are not worthy. For it is of no consequence whether they are prudent, or are persuaded by others that are ; since this will be sufficient, in the same manner as in what pertains to health. For when we wish to be well, we do not at the same time learn the medical art. To which we may add, that it will appear to be absurd, that prudence, which is subordinate to wisdom, should possess a greater authority ; for that which is effective, governs and presides in every thing. These things, therefore, must be discussed ; for now the doubt is concerning them alone. In the first place, therefore, we say that these virtues, wisdom and prudence, are necessarily eligible per se, since they are the virtues of each part of the soul, though neither of them should effect any thing. In the next place, they do indeed effect something, yet not in the same manner as medicine produces health, but as health produces the energies of a good habit of body. Thus also wisdom produces felicity. For being a part of the whole of virtue, by the possession and the energy of it, it renders a man happy. Farther still, the work is accomplished by prudence and ethical virtue. For virtue renders the scope proposed by the agent right, but prudence gives rectitude to things which tend to the scope. A virtue, however, of this kind does not belong to the fourth, or nutritive part of the soul, because its energies are not in our power, nor are rational, either essentially or by participation. But with respect to our not being at all more adapted to the practice of things beautiful and just, through prudence, in answer to this objection, we must begin a little higher, assuming the following principle. For as we say that certain persons who perform just things are not yet just, such as those who do what is ordered by the laws, either unwillingly, or from ignorance, or from some other cause, and not on account of the things themselves, though they do those things which ought to be done, and such as a worthy man ought to do. Thus also, as it seems, it is possible to do every thing with a certain disposition of mind, so as to be a good man. I mean, for instance, that it is possible to do every thing with which virtue is concerned, from deliberate choice, and for the sake of the things which are done. Virtue, therefore, produces a right deliberate choice ; but it is not the business of virtue, but of some other power, to render the deliberate choice disposed to embrace what truly contributes to the end. It is requisite, however, to speak more clearly on this subject. There is, therefore, a certain power which is called skill ; but this is a power of such a kind, that by its assistance those things may be performed and obtained which contribute to the proposed scope. And if, indeed, the scope is beautiful, this power is laudable ; but if the scope is bad, this power becomes craft. On which account, also, we say that prudent men are skilful, and not crafty. Prudence, however, is not this power, yet does not subsist without it. But habit is not acquired by this eye of the soul without virtue, as we have said and is evident. For the syllogisms of practical affairs rank as a principle, since the end is a thing of this kind, and that which is best, whatever it may be. Let the end, for instance, be something casual, but this is not apparent except to a good man. For depravity distorts the judgment, and produces deception about the practical principles. Hence it is evident that it is impossible for any one to be a prudent, unless he is a good man. CHAPTER 13. Again, therefore, let us direct our attention to virtue. For as prudence is not the same, indeed, but is similar to sagacity, thus also natural virtue subsists similarly, with reference to that which is properly so called. For the several manners appear to all men to subsist in a certain respect naturally, since we are just and temperate and brave, and possess the other virtues immediately from our birth. At the same time, however, we investigate some